Hello, welcome along to Writer's Routine, where we take a look inside an author's working day. This week, here's a big question. How would the world change if you didn't have to die? That's what Hanna Thomas Uose is asking with her new book, Who Wants to Live Forever? We talk about why, like all good novels, it was just one seed, a simple question. Also, you can hear what she's doing to get ready for telling the story.
I suppose maybe it's a bit like what an actor might do before they are preparing for a role, you know, like really sinking into the world, the scene, the feeling, trying to inhabit what I'm about to write and feel it on a bodily level and see it in my mind.
And why she was in two minds when getting feedback for the edit.
I had sort of two desires, conflicting desires. One is like, oh, I really hope they tell me exactly how to, you know, like deal with this or fix this and, you know, get me to transform this into a much better book. And I suppose the other desire is you want someone to come back and be like, it needs nothing, it's perfect.
It's on the way with Hanna Thomas Uose in this week's Writer's Routine. Yes, welcome along to the show. My name is Dan, this is Writer's Routine. It's where we take a look inside an author's working day. We see when, where, and how they write. What do they do to give themselves the best chance of getting words down on the page? Apologies for the no-show last week, by the way. I told my subscribers over on Substack that suddenly I got very busy and very ill, and they both squashed together in the same time, and I had simply no energy to do anything outside of what I was properly contracted to do. So I'm very, very sorry for leaving you a little bit high and dry like that. If you want the latest news about what's happening with the podcast, if you'd like to go behind the scenes with what we do as well, subscribe to our Substack page. It's writersroutine.substack.com. You can use the link in the episode notes wherever you're listening. This week, we're chatting to Hanna Thomas Uose, who has just released her debut. But she's done a lot of writing before that. She's completed a master's in prose fiction. We talk about why actually that happened. Why did she feel the need to go back to school? Also, she won the Morley Prize for Unpublished Writers of Colour. She was shortlisted for Orion and DHA's Space to Write project, selected for the Asian Women Writers Mentorship program. So there's all of that experience. And then she needed an idea, a seed. And then suddenly, such a simple question came to her. And I think it's something that we've all wondered. But Hanna asked it on a grander scale. What would change? How would the world change if you could live forever? You could hear what she did around that initial question and how she managed to fit in the work around everything else that was happening over the course of 6 years. The novel, Who Wants to Live Forever, it's all about Yuki and Sam, who are soulmates, destined to spend their lives together. But then when a miracle drug is created that can extend your life indefinitely, we wonder what happens when one of them decides to live forever rather than love forever. You can hear how she feels about having a one-book deal. Kind of good, one and done for the moment. You're not tied into anything. But is there a pressure there on making it work? Talking about pressure, Hanna knew the ending, but when you've set up such a grand idea, how much pressure is there on delivering that? We do all of it and we run through a day in her life. Now, there are some audio problems in this, I'll warn you. Nothing massive, just intermittent every now and then. Don't let it get in the way. Don't switch off. There's plenty of gold for us to mine. Loads of brilliant tips and advice that we unpack with Hanna. It's a really intriguing idea. And we start, as we always do, with Hanna Thomas Uose and what she sees around her in the place where she sits down to write.
Ooh, okay. Well, it sort of depends. I'm in my living room right now, and I'm at my desk, although I don't actually write here that much. I kind of use this more for my, like, work. But I can see, I do have some motivational sort of things around to keep me going. I've got a postcard of Yoko Ono to, like, inspire me, and I've got some little quotes pinned up. But a lot of the time I'm sitting in a chair in the same room in my living room, and I can see, I don't know, I'm just surrounded by books. I've got a couple of vases of flowers. I mean, I live in a pretty small one-bed flat, so I'm just constantly surrounded by all of my belongings all the time.
Oh, yeah, I'm in the same boat and massively feel you there. Just a few questions. What is it about Yoko Ono that's inspirational to you?
I think, I'm British Japanese, and I'm 41. And when I was a child, it was still a period of time where whenever I heard Yoko Ono mentioned, it was in a very sort of derisive way. And, always in relation to John Lennon and the Beatles. And I thought, I just really internalized that. And I was like, who is this woman? And then getting older and realizing her legacy of work and looking at everything she did with Fluxus, this like avant-garde group she was part of in the 60s and 70s, and how much she inspired John Lennon with his weirder work. I don't know. I find it really helpful to have evidence of women who sort of look like me doing bold and daring things.
You've got like a space, but yet you're actually writing on a sofa, right? In a living room. Why are you choosing that rather more comfortable spot to storytell in, as opposed to like an officey place?
Well, I have another job. I do other work, which is working with non-profits and NGOs on their strategy, and that is what I do at this desk, and it's where I take all my Zoom calls, and it's kind of a bit uncomfortable to write in, like the sort of height of the desk and the chair are not brilliant. So I tend to sort of default to either the sofa or this chair. I have like a chair in the corner of the room, and I put my feet up on a footstool, and something about it feels a bit more like internal and inward looking and private, I guess.
Is there anything practical around you when you are on the sofa or in the armchair that just reminds you what you're there to do? I'm talking like plot points or post-it notes and notebooks, anything like that?
Totally, yeah. So when I first sort of thought of the idea of, I had plotted it all out on 1,000 bits of paper, and then I transferred that to post-its. I had, for a couple of years, I think, my living room door was just covered in post-its, like one for every chapter. And I would take one off, when I'd finished the draft of that chapter. So that was a visual reminder. And then once I sold the book and I sort of got my edits in, or the edit letter, I sat down and I was like, okay, I need to make something like really visual that is reminding me of what my overall aim is, because I was having all these inputs, my editor's notes, all the other notes I'd got from different people, and I wanted to sort of, I wanted to like create a sort of visual North Star for myself. So I made a pin board with like lots of different quotes and lots of just reminders of what I wanted to keep in mind, and some like pictures of things that are in the novel. And I put that on a pin board, which is opposite the chair that I write in. So it's sort of propped up against a dresser. And so when I look up, I can kind of look at that and be like, oh yeah, great.
How much of a surprise is it? If you want to be published, you understand that you're going to send your work off to someone. They're going to come back with quite a lot of edits because these people know how to sell books. Yeah, when you suddenly get them all, how much of a surprise is it that your work needs all this changing?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, I don't know, I don't know if I'm different to other people, but I suppose I had sort of two desires, conflicting desires. One is like, oh, I really hope they tell me exactly how to, deal with this or fix this and, get me to transform this into a much better book. And I suppose the other desire is you want someone to come back and be like, it needs nothing, it's perfect. So, I'm not sure I was surprised by all the notes, but it's more of a sense of like, how do you sort of meld all these things into one coherent vision, and which of those notes are you sort of internalizing, and which feel true to what the book wants. I think that, each time, I think I went through 3 rounds of edits, and each time I got an edit letter, it took me about a week to sort of just sit with it, let it percolate, and sort of let the stuff rise to the top that felt really resonant with the vision that I had for the book as well.
How tricky is it to keep your confidence and be strong with that confidence when you have written this story and you know what it needs to be and what you would like it to be, yet you're being told to tweak and change it, right, to get it ready for market? And there is a natural confliction there. And ultimately, as a debut writer, you're probably the one that's going to have to change the most. But how tricky is it to kind of just like be staunch in some of your things there?
I think it's really tricky. It's really tricky because, all along the way, and even now, like it's a strange experience because some people will really connect with the book and some people won't. And you hear a sort of range of opinions and potential notes. But I think it's a matter of sort of, it's almost like a numbers game a bit, like, where are you hearing the most? Where are people landing collectively? I think, that's why it's helpful to have a few different beta readers. Like I had some friends from IMA who had read the whole novel. So I think when I heard notes or when I saw edits that were resonant with what a few people were saying, I was like, okay, there's something here that I do have to be better at translating what's in my brain onto the page. And then I think with my editor, she had a real vision for the book. And I think I was extremely lucky to sell the book to someone who, understood the essence of the book and what I was going for, and the fact that it was sort of cross-genre. And what she was doing was sort of really pushing me to put everything I knew down on the page. And it was, it did feel sort of athletic at the time. But I do really appreciate the end result. And I think, I'm sure this experience would be different with every book, and that fit between the writer and the editor. But in this case, I think that there were things that I sort of did stay firm on, but there were things that I was pretty willing to move on as well.
We'll come to more about the book in just a sec. I do want to pick up on, you mentioned that you knew it was cross-genre. How firmly was that planted in your mind that you knew right from the outset that this would be something a bit unusual, that might straddle genres, that might attract different audiences and have to be published in a slightly different way? Is that something you went into it knowing? Did it become clearer as you went along and kind of understood the industry a bit more?
I mean, not really, because this is my first novel. I wasn't really in the industry, and I would say I used to work for a literary agency about 20 years ago. But I would say that relatively I knew not that much about the publishing industry. But yeah, the idea for the book, which is sort of revolves around this core relationship between 2 characters called Sam and Yuki, who are in their 30s and thinking about what comes next in their lives. And they're sort of torn apart by the arrival of this drug called Ureta, which can extend the human lifespan. And we meet a whole cast of other characters as well. The idea for the book was very much like the world just sort of arrived, and the conceit of it arrived more than the characters themselves. And so I had tried to write a version of the book which was a bit more sort of operatic and dramatic and sort of more involved with that world building aspect. And then I sort of found that a bit, it wasn't me, it wasn't in my style. And I think I brought it down to a more domestic level and a bit closer to home. And that really worked for me. And I suppose I looked around and I I did think that, books like this do exist. I was really inspired by Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Books like that have these sort of quiet and intimate moments, but are set within a really parallel sort of world, I suppose, or in some sort of near future, I guess, that is possible but has not yet arrived.
On a practical level, how deep were you into writing, at least the first draft, when you realised that, oh, maybe this did need to be something else, that you maybe did need to ground it a bit more and rid yourself of like the grand sweeping drama of your initial idea?
Oh, yeah, I mean, not far at all. I think I spent maybe one afternoon. I'd thought a lot about the plot, and I'd had it rattling around my brain for a long time, and but I wasn't a sort of. This is back in sort of 2017, 2018, maybe when I sort of sat down and started to write it. So it feels like a long time ago, and yeah, I think my first attempt, I was like, oh no, I mean, absolutely not. And then I sort of put it down for a few months, and then I came back to it with this sort of more domestic idea, and I wrote a short story version of that, I think, at the beginning of 2019, and that was when I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I actually know what this is, and I can imagine it. I sort of know enough for a novel, and I was doing a short sort of writing course with an organisation called Write Like a Girl in London, and the tutor, Kerry Ryan, was really encouraging, and she was just like, yeah, if you know what it is, go for it, start writing it, and so I did. I suppose my days have really varied depending on where I've been in the process, but I think an ideal day, I would wake up, I need to do a lot of things to feel like a human being. So in an ideal day, I'd wake up, do some exercise, journal, meditate, have some breakfast. And then, let's say I have some work calls or something, I would do that in my at my desk. And then I have really enjoyed joining the London Writers Salon Writers Hours, and they were a big part of the process of me writing the book, especially over lockdown. And I think one of those hours is at 1 p.m. So, I'd either join the 8 a.m. one if I was feeling really lively, or I'd often join the 1 p.m. or the 4 p.m. or sometimes both. So yeah, I'd do my work. I would join one of the writers' hours, feel very like smug at having got an hour under my belt. And then depending how the rest of the day goes, if I'm on my own and in the zone, I think I quite like writing in the evenings and sort of right up until I go to bed, that sort of dark, quiet time. And most of the time of writing this book, I've lived alone, and so I've had a lot of freedom to do that. When it's been the more intensive sort of editing periods where I'm like, oh God, okay, I'm not just plodding through this. I actually have a really intensive deadline. I've made a more structured day, and I've gone to the British Library, and I've, maybe do like 3 hours there, leave the library for lunch, go back, do another 3 hours, go home, and then like try and like chill and get my brain back for the next day. So I've had a few like intensive stretches of weeks doing that. And then sometimes I've just like run away and taken myself to an Airbnb somewhere, or some sort of writing residency, which has also been amazing. So I feel like I have sort of managed to be pretty flexible in my routine. But yeah, that first one was for quite a few years.
When you have given your day a bit more thoughtful structure, because you're up against a deadline or whatever it is. What is it that you are considering? Like, how much do you know about how it is you work best, and kind of the energy you have and the amount of time you're able to work for without breaks?
Yeah, I mean, there was a period of about 3 weeks, I think, between when I signed with my agent. This was now in the summer of 2023. And then she wanted to send it out quite quickly. And so she had some notes, and I had about 3 weeks to turn them around. And for that, I sort of transformed into a machine. Meditation is like a big part of my practice. I'd say it sort of feels like a way of washing my brain and getting rid of some of the noise that might otherwise distract me from writing. So in that period, I tried to meditate 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and that really helped. And I was going to the reading rooms in the British Library and just sort of powering through. I think I knew exactly what I had to do. And those are the moments when you can power through, when it's like, okay, you've got certain scenes to fix or certain scenes to rewrite or add. That feels really clear to me. I think what feels harder to me is, it's harder to structure my day when I'm at the moment that I'm in now. I'm trying to start my second writing project, and it's like, okay, it's all a bit woolly and nebulous, and I'm like, right, I think I know where I'm going, but it's just so much more generative. It takes so much more, you're pulling things out of you that won't necessarily sort of submit to some idea of structure or timing. I think in that case, I sort of need to be a bit more gentle with myself and say, okay, actually, it's not coming now. Let's go for a walk. Let's read something. Let's take a shower and, come back and start again.
During the initial drafting, when you were writing it in lockdown, you said, there's so many of us started writing in lockdown because what else have we got to do? We might have an idea for a story. You've never had time to get it done. Here you go. Loads of the day. There ain't nothing else to do. What really interests me is the moment where people suddenly started taking it seriously. What do you remember about writing through lockdown and then realizing, oh, hang on, I am onto something. If I keep going, I could actually get this done?
Yeah, I mean, I had already got to that point, I think, before lockdown happened. So I think I had, let's see. Yeah, because I think I'd been writing this for about a year by the time lockdown came. So I was taking it seriously. I'd plotted it out. I had the whole structure. I was working my way through it. I'd sort of taken myself away and spent a couple of weeks writing it. But all I knew at that point, I think, was I'm going to finish this and I need more time. I was in a job in 2019 and part of the impetus for going freelance, which I did actually in April 2020, which felt crazy, was to have a bit more time for writing. So I had all that planned out, and then lockdown was this strange, obviously it was many more things than that for, in dreadful ways for many people. For me, it sort of arrived as this strange, I can't even think of the word, like a portal, I suppose, for me spending, like you say, enormous amounts of time alone, because I was living alone. And so I think what that meant for me was that it just accelerated the process. I think I would have finished it, and I may well have thought of doing an MA. But the big thing for me during lockdown was in that first period of us being inside, I saw some, sort of targeted ad on Facebook for the UEA Prose Fiction MA. And it wouldn't have occurred to me really to apply for it. I think I was just focused on finishing the draft, but I saw that and I was like, you know what, actually, I should be thinking about this. I should be trying to think about how, learning the craft in a more detailed way and applying it. And I think I would have done that eventually, but yeah, all that time alone, all of that, that sort of redirection, I suppose, that those lockdowns gave to some of us. It resulted in me then starting the MA the following year. So in that sense, it did sort of accelerate and make me take the whole endeavour more seriously.
On an ideal day, are you aiming to a word count? What are you trying to get down? How do you know when you're done?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm so slow. Like, I think it's better now, but in those first, few years, I sometimes could only write like 200 words a day, and I think initially my target was 2,000 words a week because I was working full time. I might only have been writing an hour a day, and I'm definitely not one of those people. Maybe if I'm writing stream of consciousness or journaling or something, of course I can bang out lots of words, but yeah, I feel like if I'm sort of generating a scene as I go and pulling it out of myself, it's not that fast. But then by the end, when I was, with the process of editing and responding to my editor, who was like, actually, can we see a scene like this? Can we see this and that? I think by that point, I knew the world and the characters so well that I could bang out those words much more quickly. And I feel like I wrote 20,000 words in maybe 2 or 3 months in one of the edit rounds, which was so far beyond what I had managed to do, like the pace. So I think I've got quicker, but I think that is mainly a reflection of how well I knew the world and how easy it was to transcribe something that was in my brain.
So when you are initially trying to bang out the words and you're getting a few hundred done every day, is that because you are obsessing about the quality of each word, or is it something to do with just framing the story?
Yeah, I think it's honestly trying to think. I think often what I do is I close my eyes for a while and I try to, I suppose maybe it's a bit like what an actor might do before they are preparing for a role, really sinking into the world, the scene, the feeling, trying to inhabit what I'm about to write and feel it on a bodily level and see it in my mind. And I think it's that process of sort of trying to have that vision before writing it down. Because otherwise I feel that what I end up doing if I don't do that is tell a very sort of superficial, surface level story. Then they did this and then they did that. And it's like, well, but how are they? What's the tone? What's the interior life? What's happening underneath? I have to kind of tune in.
On a quite a niche nerdy level, we're interested in softwares and fonts. So what do you write on, and what's your favourite font? What do you use?
So I have a MacBook, and I basically wrote the whole thing, and I'm now writing my new thing on Scrivener. And then, later down the line, it all got transferred into a Word doc and got way more confusing for me. But yeah, on Scrivener, I think I use a font. I think I use Palatino. Is that the default? Something that looks a little bit... Oh, no, hold on. I'm just opening my document now. I lie. I think I'm just using Arial. But then when I put it all in a Word doc, I changed it. I did do a bit of tinkering around, and I was like, okay, what's going to make me feel like I'm taking myself seriously? And I changed it all to Baskerville, which is a sort of slightly old-timey font. just to feel like, okay, pretend this is an actual book though, rather than, something you just made up. And I do quite like that, and I try and justify everything so that it looks like it might do on the page as much as possible. So it helps me, see it as a book, I guess.
So the process of getting this book out there has been like quite a long one that's changed. You've written before lockdown, in lockdown, at your own leisure, then suddenly you've had to cram it in. And now you come to the moment where it's out there, right? Wait, it's like a big deal for Brazen, who I think are publishing it. So I would imagine they'll want another one quite quickly. What have you learned about how you can do what you've done over the last 8 years and really cram it into a couple of years now? I mean, I imagine you're halfway through. What have you learned about that?
I sold Who Wants to Live Forever, but it was a 1-book deal, not a 2-book deal. So I feel quite grateful that I'm not sort of under the cosh to, churn out my second book already. But I do have something that I had begun before I sold Who Wants to Live Forever that I did for my dissertation at UEA. So I had 20,000 words of that already. And so I've returned to that and trying to find a way back in and realizing it was going to be a novella. That was the intention. And I think I'm realizing now, no, it's a novel and, some things need to be tweaked. But yes, it's interesting thinking about, yes, it's odd to think, okay, what is a good follow-up to Who Wants to Live Forever? I think thematically, this book sort of is very tied and connected, and almost the origin of it comes from the same period of time and the same preoccupations that I had. So it feels sort of a piece. But it's much more, at the moment, it's sort of in the first person and the second person. It's a lot more auto-fiction-y, perhaps. And that is a bit of a departure from Who Wants to Live Forever. So I feel like I'm just sort of learning again and at the beginning of something again. And it's interesting and it's fun. And it's also like, oh God. Yeah.
Can I ask you about this? So, selling your debut being a 1-book deal is a really interesting way to kind of dip your toe into the big waters of publishing, right? Trad publishing, because so many would want maybe 2 whereas you to be blunt, your career might like live or die off the strength of this novel, right? You might not get the chance to do it again. You've spoke about the benefits of that you've not had kind of the red hot rod behind you saying write another book. But how are you feeling about the whole thing in general, kind of going forward, and the pressure that this one book might have on it?
Totally. No, I mean, that is terrifying, and it is, in an ideal world, I want to have a body of work. That's partly what I had on my pinboard, that was sort of a reminder that, or at least, again, there's these sort of two selves, right? Like my creative self needs to just truck on and know that, yes, I'm producing a body of work, and who knows about the next book, this book that I'm trying to write now. And if it's not that book, then maybe it's the next book. You are sort of back to the beginning. I think that is what's terrifying about the publishing industry in general. But the hope is that enough people connect with Who Wants to Live Forever to sort of want to read something else from me, and that would be wonderful. I think, I mean, I still don't feel like I've quite got my footing within the publishing industry or quite sort of understand all the ins and outs of it. But, I think if one is engaged in an artistic endeavor in any of the arts at this moment in time in this country, it has to be the sort of impulse to create has to be about more than the potential success. Otherwise, you'd never make anything. And I have to keep reminding myself that, the fact that Who Wants to Live Forever has got to where it's got to. I've had such a dream journey with this book already. And that was based on effectively a complete delusion that I had a few years ago, that for some reason I should write a novel, which had never occurred to me before and I had never tried. And so I think, if anything, like on my good days, the lesson I have to take away from that is I have to learn to trust my impulses. On the bad days, it does feel very scary for sure.
Back with more from Hanna in just a sec. If you're enjoying the show, if you'd like to support us, you could do that in a couple of ways, and they both go an extraordinarily long way. You can become a monthly backer on our Patreon page, patreon.com/writers routine. For just a few dollars a month, you get access to our writing community there. There is bonus content, there is merch, it's all of that, and there is even a way for you to sponsor the show. Now, I appreciate that a monthly rolling pledge might not be the best way for you to support us. That's fine. If you'd like to just do a one-off, a tip, a donation, whatever you would like to call it, you can find us at ko-fi.com/writers routine for sending over whatever you'd like. It really helps me carry on giving you these chats with the best authors around, with the most intriguing ideas as often as I can. So to help us, it's Ko-Fi, it's Patreon, links are wherever you're listening, and you can go behind the scenes of the show with our weekly newsletter on our Substack page, writersroutine.substack.com. Let's get back to it then with Hanna Thomas Uose chatting about her new novel, Who Wants to Live Forever. You can hear about the pressure of delivering the ending. Also, when she had a grand idea, how she figured out which questions she would focus on when there were so many aspects of this that she wanted to really get into. And we dive back in talking about her background, having an idea, and then deciding to go back to university for a master's in prose fiction to help her get it done. Why did she do that? Why was it so important for her?
I don't think it was completely necessary. Plenty of people don't do a master's, and I don't think everyone should. They're a sort of expensive and disruptive thing to do to your life, unless you really want to. I think, one of the things is I was just so surprised to get in. I sort of applied on this whim. It was the only master's I applied to, which I think sounds so annoying, and I got in, and I was just really amazed, and it felt really mad to turn it down because of the reputation that course has. And, because I was sort of shifting my identity a bit from someone who had worked in campaigns and advocacy for the previous 15 years, I felt like I wanted some external marker of that shift, and I wanted to build up a bit of a writing community, which I wasn't embedded in one, and I wanted to talk with other people about, I suppose it felt to me that this novel arrived and it felt a bit like an affliction, like some sort of mental health crisis. Why am I sort of dogged by these ideas or this story? And I wanted to talk to other people. And it was great, honestly, spending 2 years with other people who were sort of besieged with a similar affliction. So I got to know people. I'm now part of a writing group of people who are on that course. I've got friends and readers, and I suppose the main thing it gave me was, a bit of time. So I worked part-time while I was doing that master's. I could focus more on the writing. I was reading and, editing other people's work and developing my own taste. I think the thing that those courses do is really make you a better editor, if nothing else, and therefore a better self-editor. So I did the course part-time over 2 years, and I feel like over that time my compass my sort of editing compass and my community really did both improve.
Let's talk about the novel then. And you've spoken around the idea so far, but just to drill it down to the very beginning of it, Hanna, what was the initial idea that you had for what became Who Wants to Live Forever? What was the seed that presented itself before it kind of flourished into this tree?
Yeah, I guess the seed was just the question, what would happen in the world if a drug or some drugs become available which could indefinitely extend your lifespan. And I became really preoccupied with that idea, and was thinking about all of the societal implications of that, which the book gets into, would there certain subcultures arise, how would it affect relationships, how would it affect work and friendship, how would it affect our infrastructure and, the activities that we would want to engage in day to day, and how expensive would that drug be, and what would the class implications of that be? It was just a sort of big question that arose, and I just kept sort of saying to friends like, "Oh, don't you think this would make a great film or a great book?" Or it seems really strange thinking about it now, but yeah, I was really interested in it, but I didn't at all assume that I was the person to sort of investigate it. And then I suppose I just thought about it so much. I was like, this is really weird. Like, there must be a reason why I'm thinking about it. And so, yeah, I signed up to this writing course and tried to write it down, I suppose, because I thought if I didn't, it would just keep bugging me.
So you've got that initial idea and you go to the writing course. I guess it's a grand question, but what happens next? What are you thinking of? What questions are you asking yourself before you start writing the first sentence?
I mean, yeah, I was definitely thinking of like different characters. So like I said, the world and that big question arrived, and I suppose I was thinking about characters that would express different facets of that world. And so, when I was first thinking of the book, there was always a couple, because I think it would, have a sort of drastic effect on quite a few couples. And in my first idea of the book, there was sort of someone who was very resistant to it and who'd sort of isolated themselves from this society that's developing. But yeah, I think when I brought it all closer to home, I just thought about, different versions of myself in this world, different opinions I hold. I feel conflicted in relation to the question. I think a question I'll get a lot is, would you live forever? And the answer to that is, I don't know. I think that's partly why I have all these different characters to explore those different impulses. So then the characters were sort of emerged out of their circumstance, I suppose. What kind of people would be forced into certain decisions or forced into certain behaviours once a drug like this came onto the market, and what would their reactions be?
When you decided that this could be an enormous project, right? A dramatic, sweeping thriller. When you decided to actually bring it a little closer to home and to discuss a relationship, Yuki and Sam, and how this really impacts them, how did you then make the balance of which grand questions about how the world is going to change to include and maybe try and deal with, and which ones to not worry about, and because you've only got 300 pages to deal with this big idea?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know. I feel like, for a book that's about people that want to live forever, it really covers a relatively short span of time. It covers 20 years, whereas it could have gone on, and some some people were like to me, I don't understand why this book doesn't cover 200 years, so we could see the whole arc of some of the characters. But to me, that just wasn't very interesting. It was about the near-term shift in society and the clues that we get into what might happen long term. I was never that. I was just never that interested to kind of engage with the world 100 or 200 years from now. So I think I engaged with all of the questions I could think of within that near-term scale. And then I really have left the rest to the reader's imagination, I think.
What would change on a grand level, do we think? Because it is a brilliant what if. What would change on a worldwide scale if we could all have the choice to live forever?
Well, I mean, some people are trying to make that happen now. Some particular tech bros and that ilk. And I think it has huge implications for healthcare and class. What the people who are most likely to be able to afford or to develop a drug like this are people who are already very wealthy. And, what does it mean for there to be a sort of elite who might live twice or three times as long as the people that are kind of forced into sort of servitude? I think it has huge implications. And when you hear some of these people be interviewed, I think they have a point. They say, well, it's not really up to us to think about that. It's up to government regulation. But of course, our governments are just not set up to. They don't understand or have the sort of long-term ability to regulate something like this in the current way that they're structured. So, yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and we are at a sort of a bit of a brink with some of this stuff, because I think within the next 15 years, it's not impossible to think that something like this might come onto the market for a certain subset of people. And then, of course, if it became more widely available, yeah, who knows? There's like stuff about population control. There's like a child permit that's mentioned in the novel. The implications of one's children, possibly like catching up to you in age. All of those things would be highly new and disruptive. And we're already seeing, the impacts of something like Ozempic and how quickly that's been taken up. I think something like this could have really fast effects and impacts.
When you've got this idea and this reveal of there is a drug that you could buy that would make you live forever, when you know that that's kind of the hook, how much thought are you giving to like when you are making that reveal in your novel? Because there is a setup. We'll have an intro, like a bit of scene setting and character meeting. The readers know what the book is going to be about. How much thought did you give as a writer to, okay, right, this feels right, that when my characters discover what this is all in aid of?
I mean, you find out pretty early on. I don't think I ever tried to hide that premise from the reader. Because it's the thing from which everything else falls out, really. It is kind of the inciting incident, I guess, within the structure of the book. It's always there in the world, I guess. The things that feel more uncertain for the reader are what the characters decide to do in relation to the drug.
I guess my last question is probably just about how much do you know before you start off writing something like this? I mean, you've asked yourselves a lot of questions to build this world, to wonder, hang on, what could change? Who might this be available for? What impacts would this have over the next 20 years? But you said that readers have wanted to know why you're not focusing over 200 years, let alone 20. At what point writing this did you start to realise, oh, this is how it's all going to come together. This is how this part of the story will end?
Well, like I said, I wrote the short story version in 2019, and the ending in that is pretty much the same ending as is in the novel. So I always knew where I was going with it, which was really helpful. And for me, the ending is sort of the point of the novel, I guess. And yeah, I knew what I was writing towards, and that was always the aim. And I suppose the motivator, I'm not sure how easy it would have been for me really to like keep going if I didn't know how it was ending.
Did you feel a bit of pressure then there, Hannah? If you just said that the end is the point of the novel, right? This is the message that you're trying to, say, if anything. When you're suddenly writing this story over 300 pages and not a shorter story, how did you feel about, really landing that? Did you know instantly that you had delivered in what you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, I've already seen sort of early Goodreads reviews. It's really interesting to see how the ending is landing with people. I think it is really landing with some people. Maybe it feels a bit obscure for others, but I just feel it's right. I don't really have any doubts about the ending. In my own mind, I think there are these other sort of nature focused bits woven throughout the novel, and part of it is set in Japan and is concerned with themes around Buddhism and Shinto, which is the native Japanese religion, and different conceptions of the afterlife, which to me were really important to bring into this story about this impulse to live forever, because you need to think in relation to that. What do we even mean? What do we want? Like, what are we afraid of, or what do we think lies beyond? And for me, the ending is part of this bigger, zoomed out perspective on sort of the human condition. And yes, anyway, that's all really rambly, but yeah, it was really important to me that the book wasn't just tied up with the sort of drama of human lives, but was set within a wider perspective. And I think the ending, for me, sort of expresses that desire, at least.
And that is it for this week's Writer's Routine with Hanna Thomas Uose. The new novel is Who Wants to Live Forever? You can get a copy right now. Use the link in the episode notes. It will send you over to our bookshop.org page. If you buy it there, it's helping out Hannah, it's helping out your local independent bookshop, and this podcast too. So it goes three ways. It's a win-win-win. You can also support the show on Patreon and Ko-Fi. You could subscribe to our Substack page as well. Links are in the episode notes. And you can get in contact with the show at writersroutine.com. Now, I will see you next week. All being well, my voice holding up for a brand new guest on the podcast. Until then, thanks for listening.